I use this sort of motto of train hard, recover harder, because that time that you're recovering is actually way longer than your training time. And it's actually the most important.
This is the Anthropology Podcast, the podcast where we optimize the bodies, brains, and lifestyles of entrepreneurs, go-getters, and world-changing innovators.
Welcome to the Anthropology Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Megan Walker. As an anthropologist and naturopathic doctor, I optimize the health and performance of badass women working to change the world as entrepreneurs and go-getters. You know, people kind of like you. Before we jump into the interview, I want to invite you to join our free Facebook community, Legacy. If you want to be something amazing, you need to surround yourself with amazing people. The Legacy community is made up of badass women living, not leaving, but living our legacy every single day. We are leaders, parents, entrepreneurs, and innovators collectively committed to leaving the world better than we found it. My mission is to support the health and optimization of these badass superheroes, literally to places we never thought imaginable. If you are on a mission and get it that your health is the key to your unlimited potential, then join us. We are super awesome. You can find us on Facebook at www.facebook.com/groups/BE Legacy. See you there. A few weeks ago, I was speaking at an event called Mind Body Reset, and one of the speakers who came before me was a woman named Sylvie Tetrault. Sylvie is a holistic nutritionist, a trainer, and the host of the Championship Lifestyle podcast, and her focus in her career is really on getting all of us to be and execute as high performers. When she stood up to speak, she opened her dialogue with saying, if we're going to be effective in terms of exercise and eating, it's important that we get back to our core purpose. And the second she said that, I was mesmerized. I was mesmerized because this is a philosophy that I too share. And she had so much wisdom, both at the 30,000 foot level and then right down into an implementation state, that I approached her afterwards and said, we need to have you on the podcast. I would love to share your wisdom with my audience. And so today I had the pleasure of sitting down with Sylvie, and we covered all sorts of elements, but most importantly, we talked about how to go from that place where we're sort of floundering with what we eat and how we exercise to the types of strategies and things we need to think about to start to get a plan in place. Whether you've been wanting to get going and upregulate your exercise, or you already have a program and want to take it to the next level, this conversation, these tactics, this is all for you. Sylvie Tetrault, welcome to the Anthropology Podcast. It's so great to have you.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited.
Well, you are a nutritionist, a master trainer, the host of the Championship Lifestyle podcast. How did you get to this place in your career? Share with us the story that got you to where you are now.
Yeah, very great question. I was an athlete my entire life. I played almost every single sport. And I was fortunate to play at the college level for rugby. And I had a pivotal moment in university where strength training became very interesting to me. I did some fitness testing with my team, and I felt very physically weak because I wasn't able to do a pull-up. And so it became my mission, especially being a woman, I was kind of taught that, we're not as strong as men, and that, fitness kind of looked like running around a track. That was what I was used to. So I got really interested in strength training, and I kind of pursued it as a career, not really knowing that I could make it into a career. I thought I'll do it for a little bit and then, get into a master's program or whatever my next path was. So I became a strength and conditioning coach because I was really interested in working with athletes. And I ended up working in a really busy gym in Toronto once I moved there from Nova Scotia. And I got to work with a wide range of clients, which was amazing. I just wanted to get experience. And I ended up working my way up in that gym system and actually running the gym, which was amazing. And I got, managerial experience, leadership experience. But what happened was I was kind of putting my health and my fitness aside, and I ended up with a lot of issues. So I kind of just took a total reset and quit my job and looked into how I could work with athletes again because I was so interested in that. So I looked up some high performance centers in Toronto, and I kind of put myself out there and just contacted this ex NHL player who had a facility. He was just starting it up. And I was really excited because, I had an opportunity possibly to work with athletes. So even if it was shadowing and I wasn't making, financial benefits yet, I was just so excited about, being in a high performance center. So I was lucky to work with Gary Roberts, who's still a mentor, and I still work with him every summer on his off-season program. So I started working with athletes, and along with that, there was a executive program. So we trained athletes in the summer. So that looked like off-season training for hockey players specifically. And then we had this ongoing executive program. And so I started to recognize that there were patterns in, the habits and the high performers from a business perspective, also with the athletes that I was working with. So I got really interested in not only the strength training aspect of it, but also the recovery factors. So like, how they recovered in between their sessions, the sleep, the recovery, the stress. I was looking at all of the other factors in terms of a recovery standpoint. So that sort of sparked a huge interest in nutrition for me. And I became a holistic nutritionist while working, in this high performance center as a strength coach. And so I've had a wide range of, clients. And I think we're all high performers if we just look at those qualities of a high performer. So I got really interested in it, and here we are now. I get so pumped up talking about, high performance, whether it's with an athlete, whether it's with a lawyer, a mom. It's what, gets me excited.
Well, that's just it, right? Is I think we sometimes, with the language of high performers, we tend to default to, oh, those must be the extreme athletes. And so the person running around and dropping their kids off and going to work and executing at a really high level, and they don't think of themselves as performers, but man, they are.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, we're performing all the time. And I think it's so interesting, what again sets aside, people who don't necessarily have similar goals to become the very top, and then the people that do make it to the very top. So I find that so interesting from all aspects of health.
100%. So I have a million questions for you, because you said one of those key words that always I need to stop and pause and draw people's attention to, and that's recover. I feel like people are either caught in a permanent state of recovery, meaning they never get out of bed and they never want to exercise. They're like, I'm recovering. Or they're go, 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 go. And they're like, I'll sleep when I'm dead. Right?
Yeah.
And I think that we actually just don't ever stop and go, what's the science behind the recovery? And how does that actually add to not only the mental performance, but the physical performance? Can we go into what an appropriate recovery regime should look like before we even talk about the doing on the other side?
Absolutely. I love recovery, and it sounds so silly, but I've really shifted my mindset, not only, as a coach, but also for my personal training programs. And like I said, the recovery aspect is the biggest piece. So when we look at recovery, we're recovering all the time when we're not exercising. So we're in a state of recovery in terms of, sleep is what obviously the highest state of recovery, because we're in the biggest part of a parasympathetic state, which is our rest, digest, recover, rejuvenate stage of our our autonomic nervous system. So we're in that state when we're sleeping. That's the most important part. So recover hard and train hard go hand in hand. So I use this sort of motto of train hard, recover harder, because that time that you're recovering is actually way longer than your training time. And it's actually the most important, because if we're looking at, I'll use growth hormone, for example, we actually can't, gain muscle and help assist muscle if we're not recovering properly. And we do that in our sleep, actually. So it's really important to consider that everything that we're doing outside of those training sessions, in terms of how much stress we have, how much sleep we're getting, what we're putting into our body, our, meditation and mindfulness practices, this is all comes under that recovery blanket. So I focus a lot on, sometimes it doesn't necessarily mean or matter exactly what you're doing in your training sessions, but how you're recovering from it to optimize your results.
Yeah, I love it. And so let's consider the busy, high performance executive, entrepreneur, doer. So maybe they're engaged in athletics, but they're not an athlete training for an athletic event.
Yeah.
Can you just take me through like a day of what recovery would look like, from like a recovery breakfast to snacking to your evening? Like what are some of the things that we can pull into a daily routine, being mindful of the fact that a lot of these people just don't have a ton of time, or even if they have the time, they don't feel like they have the time?
Right. Yeah, absolutely. So from a nutrition standpoint, I mean, there's a lot of things that we can focus on recovery, and it is an individual basis, but generally speaking, the first thing that we focus on is those recovery foods. So obviously healthy fats are sort of my go-to in terms of recovery. So I focus on a lot of, omega-3 fatty acids. So even making sure that people are getting things like, eggs, and they're coming from a good source, and then avocado, and then, managing carbohydrates around workout time. So, I'm sure you've heard the term of earning your carbohydrates. So I truly believe in that, especially when it comes to, exercise and someone who's more, again, high performance and just working out really hard and then needing to recover from that. It's important that they're getting enough carbohydrates. So, you might have, some roasted sweet potato if you're going to a workout and you need a little bit more energy. And then I'm huge on leftovers. So I'll use those in order to make sure that the next day they're, incorporating this stuff into their breakfast and it's quick. So hard boiled eggs, if necessary, half an avocado, and then, a bunch of greens or something along those lines. So breakfast is really important. I also do high performance smoothies for those really quick individuals. So incorporating fiber. So whether it's flax seeds or hemp seeds or a bunch of vegetables, and then a healthy fat, so half an avocado in a smoothie, and then we're looking at greens, and then we're also looking at some protein. So what that's going to do is it's going to sustain their energy levels, also keep them full and give them energy and make them feel like they're, unstoppable when it comes to their mind, body, and what they're putting out for the day. So that's breakfast. And then again, lunch, I focus on high performance bowls. So that would look like, a healthy source of protein. So salmon is one of my favorite go-tos for, brain health and recovery. And then, a complex carbohydrate, if it's around a workout time, I recommend. So again, roasted root veggies because they're easy on our digestion, a ton of vegetables, and then I'll focus on healthy fats. So either, extra virgin olive oil, a half an avocado, things like that are supporting that recovery process. And then again, that meal should sustain energy levels, make you feel like you're, again, unstoppable from a brain perspective. And then snacking I use as sort of, again, I call it sort of emergency snacking. If, you're in a situation where you're in meetings all afternoon and you're in that recovery state, it's important to focus on things that, again, are going to give you energy, but also that are going to sustain your hunger throughout the day. So, veggies and hummus is one of my go-to snacks, for fiber, for protein, as well as, making sure that obviously they're staying their consistent energy levels. And then I focus on, again, a higher fat if that's appropriate for them, making sure that they're recovering and getting those healthy fats in them. And so nuts and seeds are also one of my go-to snacks for people to have with them at all times. And, I'm huge on things like collagen pudding in order to have that with them that they can just throw in the fridge overnight, or chia pudding to get, again, healthy fats and fiber. And then dinner looks very similar. I incorporate a lot of like bone broth in order to assist, mineral content as well as collagen. So bone broth, and then, throwing some vegetables in a pan with some bone broth, as well as, a giant salad. And then, like I said, something that they've batch cooked or can get on the run in terms of protein. So, cooking a whole chicken at the beginning of the week and using, aspects of that. So in that, I also look at, sort of a recovery process in terms of managing stress. So making sure that they're sort of checking in with their energy levels throughout the day, how their mood is, what they ate. So it's a constant sort of detective work that you're doing to make sure that you're you're supporting your recovery as much as possible. And how we think and our emotions are a huge part of that as well. So, stress reduction things like take a minute to do some belly breaths. I do that a lot with clients just as a reset. Get up and move in your office if you're, responding to stressful emails. So those types of recovery tools I use with my clients just to make sure that they're sort of taking everything into consideration.
Yeah, and these things are so key. And you just said at one point, you're like the chia pudding or the collagen pudding, and I can hear people in their mind being like, I don't know how to do that.
Right. Yeah.
If you can open Facebook and you can browse on Facebook, then I suspect that you're like equally competent to go to this website called Google and type in chia pudding, and it takes I would say 5 minutes to pull together some.
Oh my gosh,
chia pudding.
It's so easy. Yeah. Like literally, I'm all about hacks when it comes to I don't even have a lot of time to be in the kitchen all the time, and I focus a lot of my stuff around that. I use the slow cooker and I do whole chickens in the slow cooker. It literally took me 10 minutes to prepare this morning. So things like that, where it's just people don't know, where it's like, going that extra mile in terms of making it a priority. Right. So that's where, the difference I see is like, okay, it's just shifting things and being like, this is important.
I 100% agree. And it's funny, I was teaching a business course the other day and we were referring to some of Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And one of them was sharpen the saw. And this is an example of sharpen the saw. Like, stop having this scrappy lifestyle where you grab the random cracker that's stale at the bottom of your snack drawer because you haven't planned for lunch, and take 10 minutes to make the chia pudding, or take 45 minutes with your kids on Sunday evening to cook up and batch cook some things so that it's ready. And then you're teaching them how to prioritize these elements. This is a key example of, if you want to be a high performer and you want to be one of those highly effective people, you have to sharpen the saw as it pertains to your health as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. And, I think just the major point there is to, find that reason that they're, taking an interest in their health and their true motivator and their why, and always referring back to that. Because if they see that, okay, maybe, starting my day with more of a balanced breakfast is going to help me to perform at a higher level in my meeting this afternoon, then that's going to be a motivator for them. And I guess it's just making those connections, because we kind of think of food as just this automatic thing that we do, whereas it's propelling everything that we do and supporting everything that we do. So I think just making those connections has been key as a coach for me, is like, this is going to help you in all areas of your life.
Absolutely. And so I always have this question so when I'm working with patients and we're doing a total lifestyle reset, I usually try to address food before movement, because food happens several times a day, but you may have a different approach with that. So do you say to people, listen, we have to get your diet down tight before we get you moving? Or do you have some introductory moving or exercise pieces that busy people can start to incorporate right now as they get their diet moving forward?
Yeah, absolutely. I do. I definitely incorporate both of them right away, but I do it in a way that is going to support their lifestyle and not make it overwhelming in the beginning. So, the worst thing is, when people on January 1st start and they're like, I'm going to, exercise 5 times a week, and they were exercising 0 the week before. And then, they're also going on this complete change of their meal plan. And then it's just completely overwhelming. And then they, do it for 2 weeks, and then it's not sustainable. Right. So I think one of the biggest things, to start is to recognize those non-exercise movement things that you can do. So what I mean by that is, walking your dog, going out for Sunday, bike rides with your family, like things that they don't necessarily see as an exercise plan in the beginning. And this is if they're going from 0, to find those ways to move. And again, things that like taking the stairs, maybe doing a little stretch session because right before they go to bed. So things that are, again, not overwhelming from an exercise perspective. And then once they get those things down, typically once they start to eat better, and I do focus a lot, like really heavy on nutrition and goal setting in the beginning, the exercise does come easier just because they've started to implement things like, I can go out and do this, small workout. And then, I talk about, doing it quick, like 10-minute home workouts. I'm huge. If you did this, then you're able to do this 10-minute body weight workout at home. We're just going to take it to that next level. So I really start with those exercise specific movement stuff, and then build off of that to see what's going to fit into their lifestyle, because we're all busy. We all don't have 3 hours a day to be in the gym. So it's got to make sense for the individual person, and then finding what they enjoy too. So, that's one of the first questions is like, what do you like to do in terms of physical activity? Like, it's always on my intake, and I get an idea so that we can start to incorporate that right away so that it makes it exciting.
Yeah, I absolutely like that. You have to love the movement, and you also have to not get caught up in this idea that it's either I'm in the gym, 2 hours a day doing these hardcore plans, or I'm not going to exercise at all. That there's this incredible in between, and the research is moving in a direction where you can be effective for 10 minutes a day, and that is going to be just as effective as being in the gym for an hour if we support it with other types of movement and activity. So for example, and like just jump in here because I'm rambling because this is occurring to me as you're throwing all these good ideas on the table. There's new research that just came out that said an hour in the gym is completely negated if you're going to sit down for 8 hours a day. It's nullified.
Yes.
So what if we worked out for 10 minutes at home and did a body workout, and then you made a concerted effort to get out of your chair every 45 minutes?
Absolutely.
Now you're net ahead. Like we have to kind of break down these preconceived ideas of what it means to eat healthy and be active, because it's an old school way of thinking. These things are so much more dynamic than this on and off type segmentation that we had always learned to do. I'll call it the 90s version of fitness.
Yeah, absolutely. And, movement can come in so many different ways. So like I said, finding what works for that person is so important, because then they'll be, inclined to do it. And the research is going that way. Like this, all or nothing, train hard until you feel like you're going to puke and die. Like that's not, not where we're at in terms of, even with athletes, like in terms of longevity. If we're looking at longevity, it's got to be a consistent basis, and they have to focus on that recovery piece as well as, getting their heart rate up and working on these other things, but in a way that's going to support, their lifestyle as well.
Yeah. And I remember Charles Poliquin telling me, and for people who don't know, he's a big deal trainer, strength trainer.
Yeah.
And he was training, I think it was, I will say, let's just make stuff up now. It was like the Canadian team and they were competing against the Japanese or vice versa. Anyway, he did no cardio with them. He did high intensity interval training, and he was working with speed skaters. And whatever team he was working with just killed the competition. And the other teams thought for sure he was not telling the truth when he said he did no cardio conditioning with them. He just did high intensity interval training that took like 30 minutes 4 times a week, and they blew the competition out of the water. So it's absolutely evolving in terms of how we exercise and move. And so to that point, cardio, thumbs up or thumbs down, because I go to the gym and I see all these women, and I'm going to pick on women on this one because we do this. And I don't know if it's because we're too intimidated to walk over and figure out how the equipment works, or whether we have this psychological need, and there's value to the psychology of exercise, of just getting really sweaty. But they're on the Stairmaster, or they're on the rowing machine, or they're on other things for an hour straight, and then they leave and they go home. And I'm like, oh, you're going to go sit now and undo all of that. Where are we at with cardio?
So I am not a cardio queen whatsoever. I'm kind of like, get it done faster and I'm out the door. And, sprints are a perfect example of that. Like in all my sports, I was a, sprinter. I wanted to get it done. If you asked me to do anything long distance, I was like, I'm so bored. No way. I've played around with cardio. Like the thought in the beginning when I got into the fitness industry is that, it was kind of that bodybuilder mindset. Like you had to walk uphill on a treadmill or do the elliptical for an hour, like 3 times a week. And we've gotten so far away from that. And even in my training, like high intensity interval training, similar to what Poliquin was saying, is that it's so much more effective in terms of getting and those recovery strategies and like making sure that you're getting the fat loss, the muscle gain, like everything that you're looking for from a strength training like goal perspective, you can get through high intensity interval training. That said, I'm huge on heart rate variability. So what heart rate variability is essentially tracking your heart rate zones in order to make sure that you're able to recover properly from your workouts. And so this is becoming a really popular thing in strength training, especially with athletes, because it gives sort of like a go ahead. If you're recovered, it gives you like, okay, you're not quite recovered. Your heart rate's a bit high this morning. You might be borderline overtraining. And then it gives you a like, stop, you're essentially overtraining. Like we need to pause and focus on a couple recovery, days. So I think that, the long distance sort of continuous stuff does assist recovery. So being able to recover your heart rate faster in between sets of exercise, or whether or not it's, a game or a race or something like that, being able to recover quicker. So, if someone likes to ride bikes for a long time, then I say absolutely go ahead. This is how we're going to do it. But we're also going to incorporate high intensity interval training, and we're also going to incorporate strength training. So when we're on that elliptical for an hour, and we're not doing any strength training or anything to assist that, yeah, in my opinion, it's not the way to go in terms of getting to your goals. We can become, and we see this all the time, is the term in the strength training world is skinny fat. So we're essentially like burning our muscle as well as our fat, which is not a great thing when it comes to, again, being strong and helping our muscle to support ourselves in terms of all our metabolic function.
And when you say training for a race, you also mean racing to daycare at the end of the day to pick up your kids, right?
Of course. Yeah. Yes, 100%.
Okay. I just need to be clear on that because that's a really valuable race in my day. So
yeah, and you need to train for that. High intensity intervals, that 15-second sprint. There you go. That's perfect.
100%. So we have all these different elements, right? We've talked a little bit about recovery. We've talked about some of these features of an exercise program or things not to do, an hour of cardio, for example. If we were pulling together a plan, a basic intro plan. Let's say we have people who are like, listen, like I used to be a high school athlete, or I was even really good about exercising last year. I just kind of fell off the wagon and school's gotten going and I haven't got my plan back in place. Can we just create the elements of a getting started plan for people, even people who are used to working out at a high intensity? Like, should they be at yoga once a week? Should they be hitting like one spin class and one strength? Like what are the elements that we should be checking off our list at pulling into play?
Yeah. So I think, obviously as a strength trainer, strength training is, super important for women these days. I think we're away from the, 2-pound step classes. We're, moving in a direction where it's important to be strong as a woman and physically, right? And that physical strength will tie into mental, emotional, everything else. So strength training is important, but I don't necessarily think you need to be in the gym. Like I said, with the busy, with us all being so busy, the 10 minutes a day, or even, 20, I do a lot of 25-minute strength circuits with, whatever equipment that my clients have. We can do it with body weight. So I'm huge on like, in and out, this is what you can do. So strength training can incorporate bands, it can incorporate weights, it can incorporate your body weight. So I'm huge on that. And so 3 times a week, I recommend strength training in some capacity. And again, that doesn't have to look like an hour and a half in the gym. If that's what you can do, great, but it's not necessary. And it can actually, again, negate some of your results that you want. So strength training, I'm huge on. Again, like even if it's some band work or whatever, or TRX, I'm huge on. And then I incorporated some high intensity interval training. So that could look like a 12-minute workout where I'm incorporating some body weight exercises. And then, or on a bike, I'll do like a 20-second sprint with a 40-second rest period, and then so on. So, if that works for someone being on a bike and being in and out, then that's perfect too. And so I'll do different versions of high intensity intervals. And then I, want them to focus on movement that's in a fun way throughout the week as well. So whether that's a long walk, whether that's a bike ride, being out in nature in some capacity. So that's sort of like a recovery session. And then I do recommend, whether that's a yoga class, if you like that, if that's your thing, whether it's Pilates, I recommend, a couple times a week or once a week at the very, least, to do a little mini recovery sessions. So it could be foam rolling, it could be some stretches, it could be, a morning stretch session or an evening stretch session that takes 5 minutes. But I do think it's important to focus on that recovery stuff. So soft tissue work would be foam rolling or using a lacrosse ball to get into some, knotted areas. And then we have mobility, which is super important. So doing a lot of work with people's T-spines. So people are sitting all day, their hips. So I think it's important to incorporate those aspects. And then we have some activation exercises. So, core is one of the big things that was a foundation for me in injuring my back. So I have a set of like little core exercises that I do with clients, on a daily basis or, twice a week that they can do just to make sure that their core is supporting them from their job, from sitting or whatever it is. So that's sort of the basis if we're looking. So 3 times a week strength training, a couple recovery sessions, whether it's 5 minutes throughout the week. And then, again, focusing on a couple high intensity intervals. And then a fun session. Fun sessions are really important. And that can just be like, again, a walk or whatever that is.
Yeah, and what's really interesting as you're talking about all of these different things, I sat here and I just added up the amount of time. And what this is amounting to is like 3.5 hours a week. If you are efficient, we're not talking 3 hours a day.
No. And that's a big confused part of this, is that it does not take, like, time is so valuable to everybody. It doesn't take a ton of time. It's just the energy that you're putting into it and what you're doing in that time frame.
It's all about strategy. It's interesting. I was with a group of practitioners last night, and everyone was talking about how to be more efficient with their time. And we suddenly said, well, why don't we look at this even more differently and say it's not about being efficient with the time you have. It's how do you scale your time? And this really is sort of the interface between the two of those. If you can get out into nature and you can, I guess we're just talking about efficiency, but if you can get out into nature and you can also do a little bit of running, or you can stop and stretch, or you can just actually breathe, you're accomplishing so many different things for your health all at once.
Absolutely. And I'm huge on that because, again, I mentioned this, but the energy management is so important. So what you're putting your energy towards, as opposed to just, carving out these huge chunks of time for things that you think are unattainable.
Totally. I made this decision a few weeks ago when I realized when I'm with my kids, I'm constantly thinking about work, or I've got text messages coming, there's just constantly buzzing. And I put my phone away. And I thought, the kids don't need you to do things. They need you to just be. And so I stopped trying to meditate in the morning because I was a disaster with 3 kids. And every time I'm with my kids, the only thing I'm focusing on is being present with them. And I actually find I'm getting more out of these being with my kids and meditating and focused on being present than I was out of trying to do the right thing. So, it's again, like, how do we break that mold? How do we do and get to the result that we're trying to achieve in the gym or with our diet outside the box?
Yeah, absolutely. And I use this example, like I have this one client who is not a morning person at all. He also runs one of the largest software companies in Canada. And he is super high performance, but he's not a morning person. And, we've gotten into this, you need to have this morning routine and be up by this time. But he makes it work for him in his specific situation. So I think it's really important to look at what's doable for you and what you want out of your time, because it's not this one size fits all, especially when you're looking at these expectations. I should be doing this. I should be doing this. We get into a vicious cycle that way.
Yeah. You got to build your own ideal life.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we live in this unprecedented time where we have access to the information and tools and people who can help you do that.
Absolutely.
If you're willing to drop the preconceived ideas of what it is supposed to be like.
Yes. I love that. And as a coach, like, I think it's so important to, understand that that's part of it, is discovering what works for you. And, I always say that you're going to be your best nutritionist. You're going to be your best strength coach. I'm just here to, help you discover your path.
Yeah. And so, there are some people who are going to say, listen, like I have a program or I have a plan. I now want to take things to the next level. If people were looking at engaging a trainer or a coach as part of the work that they're doing, What kind of things should they be asking for? Women in particular. And here's my pet peeve, and here's how I'll preface this. It drives me crazy when I watch, and I'm going to pick on men right now.
Yeah.
Male trainers are doing work with women. I'm like, oh my God, their pelvic floor.
Right.
Right? Like women we're not men. And so we don't just need the lighter version of a male workout. What should we be asking if we're looking for a trainer or to work with someone specifically?
Yeah, I think, one of the most obvious questions from the beginning is like their experience working with women, and not just working with women, but working with women in the stage that you're in. So for example, perimenopause, menopause, like menopausal women will be different than working with a 25-year-old woman, based on what's going on in their body and what they specifically need from an exercise perspective. So, history of working with women, sort of where those sort of age ranges go from, because I think that's really important to start with. And then, I think it's really important to start with, because a lot of the time when you're looking for a trainer, they might tell you what you want to hear in terms of, oh yes, I've worked with these, but then doing, even like a sample session or something along those lines to get an example. So one of the key things when you're finding a good coach or trainer is whether or not they check in with how you're feeling at the beginning of the session. So, one thing that I think every woman should understand is that, our systems are way different. We might have, a certain hormonal time of the month where we're like, our trainer might not understand that, but if they're just asking like, hey, how are you feeling today? And it's like, oh, I'm a little off today. Or like, how was your sleep? How was your nutrition over the last little bit? What about your stress levels? Like, these are all things that, if someone's helping you to work out, they need to know whether or not to switch that and be adaptive to where you're at from that perspective. So, history working with women, and then most importantly, like what their style is too, like whether or not, they are a bodybuilding style. I, would not recommend that for a lot of women, just because again, typically not what you're looking for out of a training session, but whether or not they're able to adapt to, where you're at in that phase. So doing a little bit of a, check-in at the beginning of the workout, and then also a full physical assessment too. Like if your trainer's not doing a full physical assessment with you in the beginning, and they're not seeing how you move, how your body specifically, needs to be addressed, just because, a squat is great, but a squat isn't great for everybody, right? So it's, making sure that they're making those distinctions between what works for you and developing an actual program that way. So history, and then again, those check-in points to see how you're feeling, because there could be a day where you're like ready to go and ready to be push hard. And then there might be a day where you need more of like a recovery stage, and your trainer coach should be, aware of that and able to adapt in those situations.
Love that advice. Sylvie, what do you want your legacy to be?
This is a hard one. My biggest focus is to, like I've mentioned, help people find their individual path to wellness. So discovering their inner athlete. I use inner athlete because that's my program that I developed, but through movement, nutrition, and mindset, I think that, health comes in a lot of different ways, but if we can look at and help them to discover. And so I just want to assist in that process of helping people to discover their true strength through those areas.
Beautiful. And how would you define health?
I think it's, again, getting to know your body and its specific needs. And then, the connection between the mental, physical, and emotional body. And, that feeling amazing all the time. It's not necessarily about feeling amazing all the time, but approaching your body with curiosity and compassion. And I think that's the biggest thing, is that, our bodies are constantly changing, and it's important that we're, showing it love, but also curious as to, what we need in specific situations and times in our lives.
Each month, I'm featuring a new anthropology quiz to help you unlock and uncover some of the physical performance blocks that may be holding you back from your true potential. When you know better, you can do better. To learn more or to take the quiz, head on over to meganwalker.com/anthropology quiz. What a great transition to the second part of our interview. And you didn't know these questions were coming, but they're quick, rapid fire. They're easy, and I call them KPIs. So just like in a business, you'd have key performance indicators that you need to look at and make sure you're evaluating. I believe that we have these in our life, and so we've just designed a few questions related to these. So are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay. Do you have a consistent morning routine? And if so, can you share?
Yes, I have a ideal morning routine that I get maybe 3 or 4 times a week. And then
that's still pretty good.
Yeah. So one of the first things I do is I do a bit of like free journaling. I write down what I'm grateful for. I set some intentions for my day based on what's going on that day. Movement first thing in the morning, and like I said, I've had a back injury, so I do a specific set of breathing and stretches first thing in the morning, and then I have a liter of water, sometimes lemon water, depending on the day. And then, I do, if possible, I do some creative time because I'm sort of the best in the morning, I've discovered. So I try to do blogs, newsletters, that type of thing in the morning, just because I find that I'm best in terms of creative space.
Love it. Fiction or nonfiction? What are you reading right now?
Oh, it used to be just nonfiction. I was like a sucker for knowledge, and I still am. I always have a nonfiction book on the go. I'm reading Deep Nutrition right now. It's about how our genes.
So good.
Yeah, I've been meaning to dive in for a long time. I think it was just an intimidating because I take so many notes and research, and so I'm really pumped about that. I'm so interested in genes. It's awesome. So I'm reading that right now, and then I also always have a fiction on the go. I read it before bed as a wind down. So I'm reading The Color of Our Skies right now, and it's about these two women who are trying to avoid essentially prostitution in India. So I always have something that's sort of like a story. I love Harry Potter too, so I've read that several times.
Good balance. It's amazing.
Yeah, exactly.
What is the one thing you're most consistent with respect to your health?
My nutrition. I think that, I've had some major sort of digestive issues and health things that have come up for me. And I know, my body needs to be fueled in a certain way. So I have some serious nutrition, practices, and consistency is actually the biggest thing that I start with in my coaching as well.
What do you do for fun or play?
I love to be outside. So like walks, trying new exercises. I know that sounds super nerdy, but I like, I'm interested in like animal flows and like Ido Portal and that type of thing. I think that's super interesting. And then being with loved ones and going to the farmer's market, like that's sort of like what I get pumped about every week. Again, super nerdy, but to me, that's like the most important thing is to be around loved ones and
community. It's everything.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Last question for you, Sylvie. Entrepreneurism. Are we born this way or do we learn to become entrepreneurs?
Oh, wow. Okay. So I think,
no pressure.
Because I'm super interested in genes. I do think that there is a genetic component to it. From starting to understand, there's obviously so much going down that road, but I think that we are born with a couple profiles that can help us in order to propel that. But I think motivation and drive are, something that is learned in terms of your environment. So I really think that, setting yourself up in a position that you can do the best in propelling that entrepreneurship has to come from those lifestyle factors.
Amazing. You are up to some incredible stuff. You have wonderful online resources. You have an incredible podcast that I think that people should have access to. Sylvie, where can people find you and give us a little bit more about what you're up to?
Yeah, so I have basically all my social media is Sylvie Tetrault. So sylvietetrault.com is my website. And then I have, I'm probably most active on Instagram, which is at Sylvie Tetrault, and Twitter and Facebook is Sylvie Tetrault RHN. And I'm launching my inner athlete coaching program this month. So I'm really excited about that. It's a combination of movement and nutrition and lifestyle coaching, which I just, again, obviously I'm so excited about.
Boom. I love it. We're going to have all these things available in our show notes so that people can follow up with you and have access to everything that you're doing in the online and real life space. Sylvie, it was such a pleasure to have you. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. This was awesome.
If you enjoyed our conversation and would like to hear more, head on over to Stitcher or iTunes and subscribe to the Anthropology Podcast. We would also really appreciate a quick review. When people have their health, they can change the world. Let us keep you healthy and you go change the world.